Hey there, Jordan Sheridan. Not live on a Tuesday. Of course, still going strong with our pesky YouTube live streaming ban. So I'm recording on a daily basis, a little bit earlier in the afternoon to air at 5 o'clock Eastern. And I did reach out to YouTube yesterday to make sure there wasn't any funny business going on, so that when our live streaming ban is up at the end of May, that we'll be able to go live again, and they're not going to say, well, you needed to do X, Y, and Z. So we'll see if they get back to me. I'm not holding my breath. But busy day. Lot going on in the news. We also, I interviewed yesterday Russiagate Slayer. That's what I call him, Aaron Maté. So we're going to air that. I spoke with him, I think, for about 40 minutes. So going to play that for you. We talk Russiagate, the media's essentially, I mean, what can you call it other than corruption at this point? Not just corruption, but total lack of accountability. You know, the point of having the public record in the first place is that if people get the public record wrong, and if people get the facts wrong, and if people just get an entire story wrong, not like once or twice, but for like 2.5 years, there might be some accountability. Not so much with Russiagate. So make sure you press the share button, and remember, you have a checklist. I want you to look at that like button right under the video. It's the thumbs up, and I respectfully ask you to smash the like button. Yesterday we had, I think, at one point, almost 400 viewers live at one time, and we also had a lot of likes. So the more people that press that like button, the more people that see this non-live stream. So please press the like button. If you like me, great. If you don't like me, fake it. Become a Status Quo member. Yesterday we had a good day. Might not sound like great to you, but some days we're not growing at all. So if I'm keeping it real, we had 6 new members. 6 new member signups yesterday, which is awesome. So that's statusquo.com/join. We'll talk about it a little bit more. Jen just kind of redid our membership page, which I think looks really cool. So I'll show you that. Ty is actually almost done with the last trailer for the documentary that we're going to be releasing. The documentary is set to debut. That Flushing of Flint documentary is set to debut April 23rd. April 25th is the 5-year anniversary of the Flint water crisis. For members, you're going to get that documentary first, and you're going to get that documentary free. And when Ty's done with the trailer, we're also going to release the trailer early just for members. So hope you consider becoming a member. That's statusquo.com/join. You can become a member as low as $5 to $10 a month. This is how we build a media revolution. Follow us at Status Quo. I'm at Jordan Sheridan. Subscribe to the podcast, bit.ly/Status Quo podcast. And sign up for our email list, statusquo.com. You'll see a little field to put in your email. So I am going to play the Aaron Maté interview in a little bit. We've got some news before that. Bernie Sanders on a roll. Oh, and by the way, it is 3:15 as I record this, East Coast time. So if any news comes, yesterday as I was recording, a second woman came forward to accuse former Vice President Joe Biden of inappropriate contact and touching. Jen is on high alert, so if anybody else comes forward with a credible accusation, we will I'll definitely report on that. So, the corporate media is very, very obsessed with money, and they want to know, how much are you making? Because that's what they view as the big marker and measurement for whether a candidate is, really connecting with an audience. Well, Bernie Sanders numbers that came out today, I'd say he's connecting and then some. Senator Sanders raised, let's go to the numbers. Senator Sanders raised $18.2 million. $18.2 million over 41 days. So the first quarter is measured by 3 months. So that would be 90 days. Bernie Sanders' campaign only been 41 days. Raised $18.2 million from 525,000 unique donors. Average donation, $20. So even smaller dollars than the last campaign, which was $27. It's not on this article. The majority of donors were under the age of 39. So you not only have the millennial, which is kind of 18 to 34, also have 35 to 40, which is a good sign. So the majority was under the age of 39. What I think, and 900, they just missed 900,000 contributions. So 525,000 donors from 525,000 people donated a total of nearly 900,000 donations or contributions. What is also important, it took them much longer. I think it took them, let me get my tweet here. It took them 41 days to reach 900,000 donations, whereas this time, in 2016, it took them it took them 146 days to reach 900,000 donations. It took them 41 days to reach 900,000 donations this time. And like I said, majority of donors under the age of 39. And when you add in the money that Bernie Sanders already had, from previous campaigns, he has $32 million. So he raised $18.2 million since the beginning of the campaign 41 days ago from 525,000 people. So that's like $413,000 a day. That's a lot of money. But to me, the money is not the most important thing. The most important thing is 525,000. 525,000. And I tweeted this. Compared to Kamala Harris, who had 138,000 unique donors, that's a lot. That is almost 400,000 more donors, more people that donated. And he did it in 29 less days than Kamala Harris. I'll get to Mayor Pete in a little bit. So Bernie Sanders raised 400,000 more unique donors in 29 less days than Kamala Harris. Also, Bernie Sanders has a significantly lower average donation, $35 lower, which indicates that Harris had more max donations from wealthier folks. And by the way, I reached out to the Center for Responsive Politics yesterday. We should get information on actual donors, who's donating to Senator Harris and Beto O'Rourke and Amy Klobuchar and Cory Booker and Kirsten Gillibrand and fill in the blank. We should get that. I think the deadline is April 15th for them to file with the FEC. So we should start having information, which I'm going to dig through so you don't have to. We should have that information in the middle of April, who's donating. But like I said, if Kamala Harris has an average donation of $55, that would indicate that she is making more. There's more donations coming in from wealthier folks. And I think this NBC News article, which for the most part kind of played down Bernie Sanders' money, but at the end they say where. Hold on. Where is it? Okay. Harris appears to have raised more of her money from larger donors, with an average donation of $55 compared to Sanders' roughly $20, and pulling in only $6 million online, less than half of her total raise. That's kind of important. So if you raise $12 million and half of it came online, well, in general, small dollar donations come online. So I'd like to know where the other half came from. It doesn't mean that the other half that wasn't online are all mega wealthy people, but it does mean small dollars wise, it seems that most of her small dollar donations were from online, and that would indicate nearly half of her total of 12 million came from small dollar donations, meaning the other half probably came from more maxed out donations, more wealthy bundlers, wealthy people maxing out, but doing it spread across several donations to try and get the contribution amount up. So, Kamala Harris's numbers, I'm not saying raising 12 million isn't impressive. It is. But it depends, what do you actually have a grassroots movement behind you? Because if half of your total comes from small dollar donations and the rest of the other 6 million come from more traditional big money interests, can you really say, I'm for the people, Kamala Harris? Beg to differ. But the devil will be in the details when we find out in the middle of April who is donating. But Bernie Sanders, average donation of $20, 525,000 people, 20% of his donations were new people. And the majority of his donors, I think 88% of his donors were under $100, which means that they could keep on donating and keep on donating and keep on donating, because the max amount is $2,800. The other thing that really struck me, not trying to pick on Kamala Harris, but got to keep it real, she got 20,000 less individual donors than Mayor Pete Buttigieg. I think I'm pronouncing it right. A small town mayor from South Bend, Indiana. And he had less 2 days. Two less days. And frankly, that 70 days of Kamala Harris versus 68 days of Pete Buttigieg is a little deceptive anyway, because it's not like Pete Buttigieg's announcement speech or anything was like, it's not like he was getting media coverage in the beginning. So he really, even though he's been technically in the campaign and running just as long as her, by 2-day difference, he hasn't gotten media coverage until basically the last few weeks. Kamala Harris, the day after her announcement, CNN fluffed her pillow for an hour. Had a town hall with her. So, the fact that a United States senator with, a lot of branding for the people, and a lot of the usual suspects, Hillary Clinton's people, if you look at her fundraisers, a lot of the people giving money are the same people that gave money and went to fundraisers for Hillary Clinton. So, a U.S. senator who's got, CNN has covered her extensively, so has MSNBC. By the numbers, she has a less grassroots movement than Mayor Pete, who is also had a lower average donation of 35. I haven't covered Mayor Pete extensively because, frankly, I don't really care. And if you care, let me know in the super chat, and I'll do a segment on him. But, he's not for a Green New Deal. He just came out basically saying, I have a comprehensive climate plan, but he's not for a Green New Deal. And which is telling. I've covered a lot of things in Indiana. He's from Indiana. Indiana is one of the most regulatory lax states in the country. The worst as far as lazy and lax regulation. There's pollution run amok in Indiana. Obviously, there's the East Chicago water crisis, lead crisis, but the water was affected too, which I covered at the Young Turks. So he's not for a Green New Deal. He says he's for Medicare for all, but doesn't want to get rid of private insurance. He's kind of one of these, let's check the box. I'm for Medicare for all. But he's not for a radical change of the system because he's not for getting rid of private health insurance. Bernie Sanders has not, private health insurance on the margins can still exist under a government plan. But Bernie Sanders says we need to radically diminish and essentially all but eliminate it. Other countries with universal health care, you can go to private doctors. There are private doctors, but there's not a very expansive lobby that is the private health insurance industry, and that's the difference. So Mayor Pete, he sounds great and fills that box. Oh, he understands the Midwest. He's from the Midwest, and yada, yada, yada. Sorry, he could be Bernie Sanders' department, secretary of something, but not getting my vote. So I think this is pretty important. I mean, CNN is kind of like, I heard a reporter today say only 525,000 unique donors, like framing it like it's a big disappointment because Bernie's campaign really was pushing closer to like 1 million, individual donors. But I got to tell you, his campaign launched 41 days ago. To have over 500,000 people donate to your campaign, $18.2 million, not taking a dime of corporate money, not doing any fundraisers with big dollar donors in Hollywood or Wall Street or anything. I mean, you know what you're getting with Bernie. That's a damn impressive thing. That is a very, very impressive thing. And I think the other thing, and Beto O'Rourke, for example, he's been in the race a lot a lot less long than Bernie Sanders. I think he's only been in it for 17 days compared to Bernie Sanders' 41 days. But we kind of got the same creative math from Beto O'Rourke. When he released his first 24 hours, he was reporting it in contributions, not individual donors. So like Kamala Harris, I mean, it's right there. 138,000 donors compared to 525,000 donors. Bernie Sanders is a grassroots army. 138,000 donors, it's not nothing, but it's not a grassroots army. It's just not. I mean, that's a big, big difference. And again, you're talking 18.2 million, large majority, from small dollar, $20 donations. Kamala Harris, definitely a mix of wealthy donors, bundlers, and all that. I think we're going to see the same thing with Beto O'Rourke. When his numbers come out, I'm sure he'll release them standing on a bar, so we could all look forward to that. So, what does this mean? What does this mean? I don't really want to get into the political ramifications of will Joe Biden run now that 2 women have come out. I still think he's going to run, short of a lot more women coming out, making it pretty much politically a non-starter for him to run if you start seeing more women coming out. I happen to believe, I don't want to really play a predictions game because it's a serious topic. Him being, touching and kissing women and, smelling hair, or in the latest example, playing nosies with a woman he didn't even barely knew. I do think you might see more women coming out. This is a man who's been in public life for 50 years, nearly 50 years. And I mean, all you got to do is look at the photos, videos. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's other women out there that have been made to feel uncomfortable. And frankly, the first 2 accusations were, and they said it themselves, do not rise to the, Me Too kind of whatever that standard is. But you might see women come out with stronger accusations. So we'll obviously follow that. But I think what's important here, and I didn't get to ask this question. Bernie Sanders' campaign had a press call this morning. I followed up with his campaign manager, so I'm waiting to hear. But all these polls, and I've been reporting on the fact that I don't think these polls are telling you the truth. And I've reached out to Quinnipiac, I've reached out to CNN, I've reached out to Emerson, still haven't heard back, waiting. I don't think they're going to get back to me, but we'll see. Saying, can you tell me what the actual number in quantity, how many human breathing souls you polled that are age 18 to 29? Or age 30 to 45? Or age 50 and above? Because it's important. That's very important context. If you have polls that are showing Biden up over Bernie Sanders by 10 points, I want to see how many millennials are you polling? How many people under 40 are you polling? How many people over 50 are you polling? Not trying to offend our older viewers, because obviously there's a lot of older viewers that support Bernie Sanders. But, Bernie Sanders obviously has a huge advantage against Biden, Kamala, and others among millennials. So I think what you're seeing here is, you're not getting 525,000 unique donors and still being beat by double digits in polls if the representative sample in these polls is getting a lot of those donors, right? So if in 41 days, the majority of Bernie Sanders' donations came from people age 39 or younger, it just doesn't add up that the majority of his support is coming from people under the age of 39, yet he's being shown to be down double digits in these polls. Well, could it be that they're not really polling? They could be polling people in those age groups, but they are oversampling older people and undersampling younger people. And I went through the polls 2 or 3 times. They do not provide the information for how many people are you polling. If one of them said 1,300 people. Okay, did you sample 400 that are age 18 to 29 or 40? Did you sample, 500 that are age 50 and above or 750? I mean, we should know, because polls set a narrative. Polls set a narrative and a story. So we need to know, what is the polling information? How many young people are they polling? Because it does not make sense to me that the Bernie Sanders is crushing in fundraising, majority under age 39, yet double digits. Something doesn't add up. So we'll see if they get back to me, and if they don't, I think that's kind of your answer. They probably aren't getting back to me because they don't want to give out that information, because if they give out that information, then the jig is up. And they don't want anyone to question the integrity of their poll, but you should question the integrity of the poll. We should know. Okay, it would make sense if they get back to me and say, oh yeah, well, we did sample more people over age 50. Well, then it would make sense that Joe Biden is up 10 points in a lot of these polls. So we could look at the poll with an asterisk. So, remember, smash the like button. I want you to smash that like button into smithereens, because the more people that like, the more people that see. The more people that see, the more views we get. The more views we get, the more revenue that comes in. The more revenue that comes in, the more we could go out in the field and cover the stories that no one else is bothering to look at. And like I said, if you're a member, you're going to get the documentary first. You're also going to get the trailer first. That Ty is the reason you haven't seen or heard from Ty. He's burning the midnight oil finishing this documentary. Poor guy. Most people have a year or 2 years to work on a documentary. He's had 6 months. So he's doing it so we could get this out, particularly in time for the 5-year anniversary of the Flint water crisis, which brings me to the next important story. We are going to air the Aaron Maté interview, but a couple other important stories to cover. So I want to get to this. The mainstream media apparently forgot that Rick Snyder, remember him? Former governor of Michigan, calls himself one tough nerd, I believe. Well, a judge, I think it was last year, ruled that removed him from a lawsuit. It was basically a bunch of class action lawsuits that were pooled into one giant class action lawsuit to basically get funds, reparation funds, because they were poisoned. A judge removed Rick Snyder from that fund, from that lawsuit as a defendant, basically citing some cockamamie thing that by Michigan law, he can't be sued. Well, a new judge has come in saying, that's bunk. Flint residents now can sue former Governor Rick Snyder over water disaster, judge rules. A judge says former Governor Rick Snyder can be sued by residents in the Flint water scandal, reversing a decision from last summer. Residents claim Snyder violated their right to bodily integrity by repeatedly doing nothing as Flint used corrosive water that released lead from old pipes. Judge Judith Levy says a right to bodily integrity is a, quote, fundamental interest protected by the U.S. Constitution. Levy says members of Snyder's administration had warned that switching Flint to the Flint River could lead to a potential disaster. Members of Snyder's administration. No. That's not true. I think what she means is, I think what the writer was meaning, Levy says members of Snyder's administration were warned that switching Flint to the Flint River could lead to a potential disaster. The city was under state management in 2014 and 2015. State management because Rick Snyder put in an unelected emergency manager that decided in Flint to switch from the Flint River, to switch from Detroit's water system to the Flint River. And that unelected manager was essentially just a proxy for Rick Snyder. So essentially, Rick Snyder decided to do this. Snyder's Department of Environmental Quality failed to require corrosion control. Levy, a federal judge in Ann Arbor, is overseeing lawsuits related to the water crisis. She released a 128-page opinion Monday. Snyder left office in January. He has apologized for failures that created and prolonged the crisis. How kind of the former governor to apologize for failures that led to permanent brain damage, to permanent physical damage. I just spoke with a resident that I have interviewed. She is waiting for test returns, to see if her cancer is now, I hate to say it, but to see if her cancer has got to the point where it will be fatal. So I'm not a religious person, but I'm definitely, praying for her and many other residents that I've interviewed. The thing about this that's so crazy to me is, for example, my interview with Aaron Maté that we're going to air in a little bit, we're talking about Russiagate and how the media got things so wrong. Well, the media is not only at fault when it gets things wrong. The media is at fault when it forgets how important certain things are. All you have heard is we cannot normalize Donald Trump. Well, what is more abnormal? The 24/7 coverage of a circus animal, or basically after 2 weeks in a lead-poisoned community where still to this day people are having rashes. Still to this day people are losing hair. Still to this day I've heard people telling me they're getting nosebleeds. And the long-term consequences, you have children forgetting letters in the alphabet, forgetting their numbers, slow, cognitively, really just damaged to the point of developmental delays. You have children that could barely walk. Their bones have been affected. You have a city that is basically the Walking Dead, and nobody seems to give a damn, including the local media there. We do. And when you see this documentary, again, we're releasing it April 23rd. Myself, Jen, Ty, heading back to Flint for the 5-year anniversary. We're going back there because you're funding us to do it. Our GoFundMe is still going. Right now we're at $51,385. We are creating a separate fund just for this trip because we're releasing the documentary through this trip. So we need a little bit more funding, not only for the travel there, but for marketing. We got to market this documentary. Unfortunately, we're not distributing it through Netflix or something big like that. We're distributing it through us. So we're definitely going to need more advertising dollars. So please, please, please. Jen's working on creating the page for that. But until then, GoFundMe. And of course, like I said, this documentary was only possible because of you. So this is our new join page. See a cool little laptop there with newspapers. This was all Jen. See the microphone. We're giving it back to you. You see us in the field. This reporting was made possible by you in Seattle, covering the homeless epidemic, brought to you by Jeff Bezos and Amazon. This was us on the road during our documentary. You're going to see this interview during the documentary. That young 1-year-old baby has white blisters and rash all over her arm, legs, and ears. They had just moved into that home last year in Flint. She didn't get those blisters and white spots from sitting there, watching TV. The mother was putting her in the bath for 30 minutes a night. That was made by you. There's Ty, Jen, and I. There's the video about joining, and obviously the nuts and bolts about joining. $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month, or $179 a year. We got 6 new members yesterday. Hey, if we got 6 to 10 every single day, we would be a lean, mean, grassroots media revolution machine. Because that's really what it takes. Small dollars, just like Bernie Sanders. We're not Bernie Sanders for sure, but that's how we're going to fund this, and that's how we're going to fund reporting. And we're trying to work, I don't want to give too much away, we're trying to work out that we could actually release the documentary in Flint, maybe at a church or something, play it for the residents there, and then obviously release it online. Our members are going to get the documentary first, a few days before everybody else. So statuscoup.com/join. To become a member. That's how we're going to do this. So I hope if you've been on the fence, again, Ty's almost done with the last trailer we're going to release before the documentary. And I think once you see that trailer, you're going to be even more inclined to support us. So, well, support us anyway before the trailer, but you get the point. But I guess where I'm going with all this is there's no accountability, period, anymore in America. Whether it's the media screwing up on a story, whether it's the media totally, abdicating its duty and leaving poor black and white people in Flint to basically die and fend for themselves. That's what's happened. Every time we have gone to Flint, and I've been there 13 times, every time it's so striking to me, because if you are a real journalist worth your salt, a man, a woman, whatever, this is the story of a lifetime. Not only were these people poisoned by their own government, but it's been covered up after the fact. That's what this documentary is about. This documentary shows us knocking on 450 doors last summer and last fall to find out that the state of Michigan's top environmental agency cooked the books. They flushed residents' water lines right before taking lead and copper samples, meaning those tests were doctored. Meaning the declaration that Governor Rick Snyder, who is now back as a defendant on that giant class action lawsuit, that governor, when he declared a year ago, April 2018, that Flint's water was restored, and then with that declaration, that's basically as much, that's like Flint's version of mission accomplished. He was George W. Bush, fighter pilot landing, restored. And then he shut down the free distribution water pods. There are still to this day people in Flint that do not have a choice but to drink water that, I'm not saying it's 100% still contaminated. What I am telling you 100%, the testing was manipulated, and that testing is what they used to declare the water safe. So, wise minds, common sense, I've been there. Why are people still getting rashes? Why are people still losing hair? Still, 5 years later. Why are people still having nosebleeds? The list goes on. Autoimmune, cancers, muscle pain, bone pain. They don't have Medicare for all. That's one of the questions I was going to ask Bernie Sanders' campaign chair today on the press call. As president, do people in Flint, if obviously their goal was Medicare for all for everyone, but until then, should people in Flint have Medicare for all? And not just Flint, there's plenty of other people that have been poisoned and environmentally damaged all over this country, from lead to arsenic to now PFAS, cancer-causing chemicals made from the manufacturing of Teflon. So there's no media accountability. So then I thought, how does the governor of Michigan, now ex-governor, how does this man just get away? No accountability. He was the governor. He's the chief executive of the state of Michigan. There's been no criminal charges filed against him. And until now, until this judge decided this, he was not going to face any even civil liability. If there is no accountability for the media, if there's never accountability for actual politicians, how do we get change? How do we, as a society, gain protection from these people? Because if they could get away with it constantly, the next one who's just like him in another city, in another state, maybe yours, they can do the same thing because he got off. Nobody's looking. Nobody's watching. In Michigan, it's to this day one of the biggest scandals. Freedom of information requests do not, if you're a journalist, freedom of information requests do not apply to the governor's office. So I can't get access to his emails in the critical time leading up to the Flint water crisis and that water switch. His office, his office released some of the emails, but not all of them. So this is a good day for the people in Flint that he is now a defendant again on this lawsuit. But make no mistake about it, Rick Snyder, he's a wealthy man. And he's going to have the best damn attorneys money could buy. And he's going to have right-wing think tanks behind him. He already has a right-wing think tank behind him. It's called the Mackinac Center in Michigan. So, yes, he might lose money. He might be liable and on the hook for a lot of money. But is that justice? Is that justice? to the children that are forever damaged? Is that justice to the parents, many of whom I know that could barely get out of bed in the morning? Is that justice to the residents who have spent thousands of dollars out of pocket? One woman that I know has spent $30,000 to $40,000 out of pocket. Is that justice? Because if Rick Snyder gets away with it, I'm talking criminally. If he gets away with this criminally, the next guy or gal is going to get away with it. That's why I've been so passionate from Flint to the beginning. From the beginning to the middle to now. Because if you do not hold these people accountable, if the media does not continue to cover this, that's the playbook. And that's what people in other communities are going to look. From governors to lieutenant governors to congressmen to senators to city council to dog catchers. If ground zero for environmental catastrophe, for environmental genocide, if nobody of significant level, I'm talking about the governor of the state where this happened, who, by the way, was trying to end the free water distribution to the poison people of Flint earlier than he did. He was kicking and screaming when a judge demanded that they deliver home to home free water, which they never did. So that's why I cover it. That's why we're going back. End of April. That's why Ty has been working on this documentary pretty much night and day. For our business, it would have been smarter for us to have Ty work on a lot of other things to help us get more clicks or more this or more that. But we think this documentary is more important. So that's why we've had him working on that. And he's doing a great job. And I'm excited to play the trailer. When he's done with the trailer, I'm going to post it first for members. And then maybe a couple days later for the general public. Same thing with the documentary. So if you've been on the fence, I hope you'll consider becoming a member today. Statuscoup.com/join. Because I could tell you, as humbly as I could say it, I think you would be proud to support us once you see this documentary. All our reporting, Jen and my reporting, and accountability. I don't want to get into full details, but as I've already said, we did meet with the Attorney General's office. We did meet with the Solicitor General of Michigan in February about this. I'm not going to go into further detail than that, but let's just say that's a good thing. We did meet and discuss and share our findings with the Solicitor General, who was put in charge of the entire Flint water crisis legal cases. She was put in charge in January. We met in February. I would assume you know that they are not going to meet with us for no reason. So, with that said, remember, press the like button. Remember, GoFundMe is going. Before I play this interview with independent journalist and Russiagate slayer Aaron Maté, if you like what you see, the GoFundMe is going. If you don't like GoFundMe for whatever reason, you could do it in Super Chat. This is a Super Chat, even though we're not live. And like I said, statuscoup.com/join. So yesterday, Aaron Maté and I had a good discussion. I wanted to talk to him a little bit after everyone else did because I wanted to see how more developments. Obviously, the Democratic Party is talking about now subpoenaing Attorney General William Barr and the Mueller report to get the whole redacted report out sooner. I'm not against that. I think the sooner the better. I don't think it should be, weeks and weeks and weeks to redact things. But I think there's more important things to show and talk about when it comes to Russiagate. And I think that between Rachel Maddow, between David Corn, between others, the original sin is the propaganda, is the conspiracy theory with no facts. But now we're entering a whole nother level where they're still going, and they're still going with it. They're still misleading their audiences. And this is dangerous not only because it's ramping up a new Cold War, it's dangerous because this is exactly what Donald Trump wants. He wants them to keep doing this. He wants them to keep playing into this ridiculous conspiracy fantasy because it's going to help him in his message that the deep state is after us, the fake news is after us, re-elect me. That's the only way to fight them. And the worst thing you could give someone with authoritarian tendencies is a good narrative of an evil cabal against him and us. And that's what's happening. Here's my interview with Aaron Maté. It's 40 minutes long. If you like it, leave a super chat. I'm in the live chat while this is happening, so I'll answer your super chat or a GoFundMe. Aaron's an independent journalist. He's been with The Real News. He's been with Democracy Now! And now he's out on his own. Here we go. Hey, it's Jordan here with independent journalist Aaron Maté of Russiagate fame, currently writing for The Nation. He's been with Real News, Democracy Now! I had to wait my turn because he's such a star now. He was on all the outlets, other than corporate outlets, that is, to talk about the what he was very prescient about. If he's humble, but I'll give you a lot of credit because you basically were very meticulous for the last, I guess, over 2 years at this point, detailing why investigation is fine, but the mass speculation, there's no facts to support it. We're about a little over a week now since Barr came out with his synopsis. I wanted to point to a clip, of Rachel Maddow to start. So Rachel Maddow plays this clip. Let my audience see it.
This is a thing that Mueller's team does in its sleep. It is hard to believe that they'd leave the newly appointed 68-year-old Attorney General William Barr to himself personally pick through the report to try to figure out what mentions in this 400-page report might pertain to open cases. They wouldn't leave that to Barr to do that. Mueller would have done that. Mueller's team would have done that as part of producing anything that they handed over outside their own offices. They've done that with every other document they have produced in the course of this investigation. You'd assume they'd be able to do that for this document too. But William Barr says, it's taken him a really long time because he's having to do all that himself.
So she's basically, talking actively, kind of inventing that Barr is just going rogue on his own without Mueller's support. But her producers, who are still living in reality, put on the bottom of the screen that Barr now being assisted by Mueller. So it's now really devolved into this. I don't know if she's. I'm being serious. I don't know if she's just had a break and really believes this, or if this is just part of the ruse. But this is now Russiagate birther or truther, or put your adjective level with Maddow, and we'll get to others too. Look,
what Maddow is doing here is following continuing the approach she's had throughout the entire Russiagate era, which is basically just to literally omit the countervailing facts. The difference, though, is that this time it happens to be the bad timing of having her producers put up the facts below her on screen on the Chiron. So she's claiming that Barr is redacting the report by himself and suggesting that he is covering up the damning truth, while at the same time, unfortunately, the Chiron reads exactly what the news was of that day and what the truth actually is, which is that Mueller is assisting with these redactions, so that what Maddow is saying with her mouth is the exact opposite of the truth, which is at the bottom of her screen. So it's just an unfortunate, unfortunate timing for Rachel Maddow that her own producers happen to have included the truth in one of her broadcasts. And it's no surprise to see the cable pundit most responsible for promoting the Trump-Russia conspiracy theory now continuing to double down on it with more conspiracy theories. This one now, the truth is being hid from us, and Barr is redacting out all the damning evidence. And, it's the question will be, I think, whether audiences will finally see through this after being misled for over 2 years, after being bombarded with this for every single night. Hosts like Maddow covering this issue more than all other issues, on days when the Republicans are passing repeals of Obamacare or a massive upward transfer of wealth from lower income classes to the rich through the tax cuts. Covering people like Maddow are covering Russiagate more and covering, and I shouldn't say covering, really promoting theories that are now turned out to be totally baseless because the person who they promised would validate their conspiracy theory, Robert Mueller, has just come out and rejected it.
Right, and to that point, I mean, Trump just totally disregarded a federal judge and granted a permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. There was a Special Olympics thing, which probably would have went through if the media didn't challenge it. Where Betsy DeVos wanted to cut it. I mean, there's so many different things going on. I wanted to ask you because, to me, you know, I don't know if I agree with Michael Tracy that, like, this is the most dangerous thing of all time. I think this is...
Did he say it's the most dangerous thing of all time? I mean,
yeah, this is very dangerous. You know, he's still tweeting and that this is going to have ramifications that will, you know, take years to unpack. I don't know about that. But I do think as a greater media exercise, I'm kind of to the point now where I watch this, and what's the point of having a public record if you could just pretend that you never mangled the public record? I mean, from David Corn to Rachel Maddow to Morning Joe. I mean, Chris Cuomo, it was Jake Tapper yesterday on the Sunday show says CNN hasn't gotten anything wrong during this. They just reported on the facts. I mean, they pushed the Guardian's now clearly false story about Manafort meeting with Assange. There was the whole debacle with them, you know, can't read dates, where they put out there that Trump's campaign got a tip off about the leaks. I'm sure you could give more examples than I did. What are your thoughts? I mean, I've worked at MSNBC, you've worked for independent outlets, but it just seems like if we get stuff wrong, I mean, we would be basically marched out of this industry, or they would attempt. But if they do, they're going to get promoted.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, having written on this topic for The Nation for 2 years, like, all my pieces were vigorously fact-checked. There were other people at The Nation who were not happy that my stuff was being published because they believed in the conspiracy theory, and they felt, I think, as if, you know, confronting it, challenging it, was a way of defending Trump. And of course, I feel the exact opposite. I feel that there can't be a bigger gift to Trump than going all in on a conspiracy theory, distracting from his, you know, actual policies, diverting liberal hopes into and energies into this Russiagate fixation. And then, of course, seeing it all collapse there right in time for Trump to launch his 2020 campaign so we can take advantage of it. But that's a side note. But, you know, so on our side of things, I can just assure you that, you know, I was vigorously fact-checked. And unfortunately, because that same standard didn't apply to those who were promoting the conspiracy theory, that's why we have this, like, endless list of mistakes and retracted stories. But you know what? It's a mistake even, I think, to confine the issue just to the stories that got retracted or have had to be walked back. Because, you know, so much of how propaganda works is not just in propagating false stories and saying false things. It's also simply in omitting the countervailing facts, you know? So if MSNBC doesn't have on a single Russiagate skeptic for its, you know, basically the entire 2 years of Trump's presidency, they're not doing anything false there, right? So you can't say that they've made a factual mistake, but they're committing a brazen act of propaganda, which is you simply censor the voices who are presenting the countervailing evidence.
Well, not to interrupt you, but there was a Vanity Fair article that basically was quoting people that work at MSNBC anonymously, saying there just wasn't a marketplace for skepticism.
There we go. There wasn't a marketplace for skepticism. So we're supposed to believe in the marketplace of ideas, but in that marketplace of ideas, skepticism, I guess, isn't a part of an acceptable idea in the marketplace. I mean, that's just amazing. What that is saying is that they couldn't tolerate points of view that countered the narrative that they pushed, which is literally, I mean, I couldn't define propaganda better myself, you know. So that's MSNBC staffers basically acknowledging that they're doing propaganda, which is fine. I mean, they have every right to do that, but at least call it for what it is. I mean, you know, and that's what I've certainly called Maddow, and I think that applies not just to her but many others. They're, in the sense that they ignore the countervailing evidence, not just that they make false statements, but that they ignore all the countervailing evidence. And they, of course, ignore the people who are pointing out the countervailing evidence. They're acting as not as journalists, but as propagandists.
Right. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, I did a video, you know, frankly, I don't really talk about the Young Turks that much, but I think independent outlets, not just the Young Turks, like Sam Cedar just had Michael Tracy on, pretty confrontational, but he was basically like defending Marcy Wheeler's integrity, who I know, I mean, you have had fact-based jousting with her on Twitter for I don't even know how long. And she gave up an FBI source. She's been wrong. She's kind of the lower profile Maddow as far as Twitter. So it's just like people are, even Sam Cedar, who I don't watch, whatever, I'm not going to knock him. I just think he's a little more establishment than I would classify myself. But they're basically like, well, what would you have us do? The president was being investigated. And I want to make it clear, like, I think what you and I were trying to say, and Matt Taibbi, is we're not opposed to an investigation. We're opposed to a conclusion being pushed, not based on facts.
Yeah. Look, on the issue of the investigation, I'm very happy that special counsel. I've always been supportive of Mueller's investigation because, as Glenn Greenwald has said, there were just so many questions around the issue of Trump and Russia, and there was so much going either way, and there was confusing. So why not have an investigation with basically unlimited powers to get to the bottom of the facts? It's a good thing. It leads to transparency. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that I think the initial investigation that Mueller inherited, the initial investigation into Trump and Russia, was justified. I think it was bullshit. Like, if you look at what led the FBI to open up an investigation of the Trump campaign's ties to Russia in July 2016, and then later on what led the FBI to open up another investigation, which was a counterintelligence investigation of whether Trump was acting on behalf of Russia, there was no basis for either of those probes. I mean, and the reason why I think it's important to point that out is because it speaks to how baseless it was for so many people to get their hopes up that this would lead anywhere, because the basis for it was so thin, and it has to do with this tip that the FBI got about George Papadopoulos, and then the opening up of a new counterintelligence investigation of Trump in May 2017 had to do with his firing of Comey, and also FBI officials, according to Andrew McCabe, being uncomfortable with Trump's warm views about Vladimir Putin in public. So, I mean, those to me are not legitimate grounds for a criminal investigation or a counterintelligence investigation. That's separate, though, to me from the issue of whether Mueller should have investigated, because it was so controversial, and I thought, why not have an inquiry? And now we're seeing the result of it that a few of us predicted, which is that Mueller would not find any factual basis for the suspicions that led to the opening of the investigations he inherited. Talking about people like Marcy Wheeler, I've done enough debunking of her and arguing with her. The significance of people like her now is that they were the ones venerated by, not just by, MSNBC and the Washington Post, but even progressive outlets. So, Marcy Wheeler, who believes strongly in a Trump-Russia conspiracy, made all these predictions that Mueller would indict people for a Trump-Russia conspiracy. She was the go-to guest on Russiagate for Democracy Now!, which, a show I come from. I worked there for 10 years. To me, it's the most noble show in broadcast media in the United States over the last 20 years. It's got such a stellar record. I'm proud to be a part of it, and it does great stuff. But it's an illustration of how much Kool-Aid was drunk across the media, not just by MSNBC and CNN, that the flagship progressive show featured as their go-to Russiagate analyst a conspiracy theorist who got this all wrong and excluded voices like mine and others who were pushing back. And so that's just a reflection of the fact that this is not just the reckoning that needs to happen now does not just apply to corporate news. It also applies to those who brand themselves as being different from corporate news, as pushing against the dominant narratives, because in the case of Russiagate, many outlets very much went along with it.
Well, I also think beyond Russia, because this is not, obviously the micro version is the Mueller investigation, but beyond it, by allowing people like David Korn, obviously, Jake Tapper, Cenk Uygur, a lot of others, to kind of just do this like Houdini act. In Korn's case, well, collusion was never the big thing. It's that. What did he say? Is
aiding and abetting.
Aiding and abetting. Or Cenk said, I was always talking about the financial part, even though I was on a panel with him where he wasn't. Doesn't it? It kind of has this WMD effect where there's no accountability, so these people aren't more vigorous next time because they face no consequences. I want to be clear. I don't think you could equate like bungling a story like this to hundreds of thousands of Iraqis dying and ISIS being created and all that. But the journalistic malpractice, as Matt Taibbi outlined in that great piece, what are your thoughts on it? It just seems that why would they be more vigorous next time? And next time could mean they're going to be pushing stuff about maybe Trump's campaign is working with Russia for 2020.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Matt Taibbi's point was been widely misunderstood because he made extremely clear, that he was not comparing the consequences of Russiagate to the consequences of the Iraq War because they're incomparable, right? Nobody would compare them that way. But in terms of the scale of the media malpractice, like the violations of basic tenets of journalism, they're very comparable. And you can make an argument that Russiagate is far worse because, at least in the case of Iraq and Saddam Hussein, I mean, Saddam is a bad guy. He's a dictator who's killed, tens of thousands of people, mostly, of course, with the U.S. support, but that's a side issue. So at least there was, like, something there, in terms of, like, it was easy, or it was not implausible that this awful dictator could possibly have weapons of mass destruction, even though, of course, all the available evidence pointed to undermining that theory. In the case of Russiagate, it's a conspiracy theory. The theory of the case makes no sense. Like, how and when would the Russians and Trump actually have conspired? There's no actual evidence of any kind of contacts between the Russian government and Trump, except for anonymous-based stories that either turned out to be unsubstantiated, or in the case of a critical one, like the one that came out in the Times in February 2017, rejected, because basically in February 2017, the New York Times reported that senior Trump campaign officials had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials. And when that came out, everyone was like, whoa, oh my God, this is damning. But it never was confirmed by anyone. And then months later, James Comey, in testimony to Congress, rejected it, said in the main it was not true. But of course, that was not retracted. And there's a part of this like consequence-free media climate where you can say all these insane things, print them in the most respectful, like a respectable newspaper possible, the New York Times, and have, even when it gets rejected by the head of the FBI, still not have a retraction. And yeah, that's the culture we're seeing now. We're not seeing, the problem is, the reason why it's hard for accountability now is because so many people because so many people drank the Kool-Aid, right? So it's like, it's going to be hard for Democracy Now! And The Intercept to like demand accountability from MSNBC when they were taking part of it. Like, I'll read you a quote from Betsy Reed, who's someone, I've known for a long time, I think is really, really intelligent, has done great work, has done great work at The Intercept, but, this is the head of this outlet that brands itself as being adversarial. But with the exception of basically Glenn Greenwald, whose blog The Intercept has no control over, he writes whatever he wants. When it comes to the editorial decisions of The Intercept's editors, they drank the Kool-Aid. They went along with Russiagate to the point.
I'll point out, they hired James Risen from the New York Times, and as far as I could see, I could be wrong, the only stuff he's written about is why Rye collusion is coming.
James Risen was basically hired because The Intercept was publishing Glenn Greenwald, and Glenn was becoming synonymous with Russiagate skepticism, and so The Intercept was becoming synonymous with Russiagate skepticism, and there were lots of like staffers who were uncomfortable with that. I also would not be surprised if Pierre Omidyar, the owner of The Intercept, was also uncomfortable with that because he is a devout Russiagator who funds people like Bill Kristol, by the way, which is a whole other story. But so I would not be surprised if James Risen was brought in for the sole purpose of peddling Russiagate, and that's exactly what he did in the most embarrassing way. And if anybody's interested, you can see an interview I did with James Risen, where after The Intercept published a story based on a leaked NSA document that they got purporting to show that the Russians were trying to hack into U.S. voting systems, I pointed out to James Risen that the document that their story was based on did not show anything of the sort, and that they blew it way out of proportion, and he could not defend that story on its actual merits, and he ended up hanging up the phone on me, which speaks to you of the kind of like mindset that The Intercept enabled, which I just think is a shame because it tainted such great work they do. But let me read to you what Betsy Reed said. So she said this in a profile of Glenn Greenwald in the New Yorker. And the aim of that profile was to basically malign Glenn and cast doubt on him because he was doing such great work challenging Russiagate. So and in this piece, kind of Betsy throws not Glenn necessarily, but other Russiagate skeptics under the bus. She says this. She goes, Betsy Reed, the editor-in-chief of The Intercept, recently told me that, quote, Glenn has a core of incredibly passionate and dedicated followers, unquote. But she added, she is wary, quote, of a kind of pale imitation of Glenn, people who may be partly inspired by him, but don't have the nuance or intelligence he has, unquote. She was referring to Russiagate skeptics on the left, on Twitter and elsewhere, quote, who are so convinced they are being lied to all the time that anything the intelligence community says can't possibly be true, unquote. Reed's view is that, at this point, it's not helpful to the left and to all the candidates and causes we favor to continue to doubt the existence of some kind of relationship between Russia and the Trump campaign. We know some basic contours of it now, thanks to Mueller, but I think we may learn more. And we can't refuse to see what's in front of us, unquote. So there's a few things going on there. First of all, she's saying that no one quite has Glenn Greenwald's nuance or intelligence, okay? Maybe that's true, I don't know. But then she says that what's funny about her talking about nuance is then she goes on to portray all Russiagate skeptics as having the belief that, in her words, we are being lied to all the time, and that anything the intelligence community says can't possibly be true, unquote. That to me is the most like unnuanced generalization about Russiagate skeptics I've ever heard. None of us believe that anything the intelligence community says can't be true. I mean, no one except for like maybe a fanatical conspiracy theorist believes that. What we believe is that claims should be assessed on their merits and that we shouldn't take intelligence community claims on faith in the absence of evidence, which is something quite different from believing, as Betsy Reed says we do, that anything the intelligence community says can't possibly be true. So the irony there of her using the word nuance. And then she says that we know the existence of some kind of relationship between Russia and the Trump campaign, and we can't refuse to see what's in front of us. So, well, actually, we know now, thanks to Mueller, that there was no relationship between Russia and the Trump campaign. At least a relationship in any way that was the focus of Mueller's inquiry, which is whether or not there was a conspiracy. So, I'm not trying to single anybody out, but I just do think it's important when we talk about the media reckoning that has to happen here. It's not just MSNBC and CNN. It's even those outlets that paint themselves as being alternatives to MSNBC and CNN.
Well, I don't want to get like too meta, but I think we both know, being that we're in New York, you in Brooklyn, me in Manhattan, that a lot of the reason, I don't know Betsy Reed, but when you look at editors of major outlets, they're in New York and D.C., right?
Yep.
Not a lot of people in Detroit or Idaho. So there's kind of this groupthink mentality, even among some independent people. I said when I was at the Young Turks, when I was there, like, sometimes, you could be critical of the DC bubble, but you guys might be in an LA bubble. So I think that kind of seeps in. I want to pivot because there's really been little attention paid to this, and I think this is why independent media exists, to bring this out. I don't expect CNN to bring it out. Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, there was no indictment of Julian Assange. I think Maddow was still pushing that there might be something sealed or unsealed, even though that's been told by Barr. And again, I love these people that like, this is the Barr report. He might be lying. Well, then that would be a real scandal if the Attorney General is lying about what Mueller found, because he quotes directly from Mueller. But anyway, Assange was not indicted. As far as we know, with Roger Stone's indictment, there's no evidence of a direct communication or Assange tipping off Stone or anyone in the Trump campaign. So basically, WikiLeaks has been like made the boogeyman. It's a fact that Russia was WikiLeaks' source, even though no forensic evidence was ever provided of that. Do people... I don't hear, other than people that would normally come to Julian Assange or WikiLeaks' defense, I don't see the Atlantic or all these people doing autopsies on Russiagate pointing out there was no indictment of Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Not only that, Matt Taibbi reported that Mueller never even reached out to speak with Julian Assange.
Yeah, that's true. And in fact, WikiLeaks tried to reach out to the Justice Department to broker some kinds of talks, because Assange was apparently showing some willingness to speak to the FBI in exchange for some sort of guarantees for his safety, because of course he faces the very serious threat of extradition to the U.S. If I have that part right. But what I do know for sure, yes, is that Mueller never tried to speak to WikiLeaks, which is interesting. Why wouldn't Mueller want to speak to the publisher of the emails whose theft he was investigating? That raises many questions. You know, I don't know the answers, but it's it's interesting.
I'll be more specific. If you had communications, any communications, other than the one we know, where Assange is saying, like, stop pretending, stop making it seem like we're talking. I think he said to Roger Stone, like, stop portraying.
Stop making false claims of association.
Exactly. So if you had anything else, I think you'd be derelict not to speak with Julian Assange. People are wondering, well, why didn't Mueller subpoena Trump to speak? I would equally want to know, why didn't Mueller speak with Julian Assange or WikiLeaks? It could be about anything, really, but obviously potential communications. So I just think it's part of this, like many things, you know, we selectively love people like WikiLeaks when their leaks are good for us, but as part of a conspiracy, you know, they are working with the Russians. And I think that's dangerous, because if we're talking about who's right and who's wrong, we've already addressed who's been wrong. As far as I know, WikiLeaks still has a 100% authenticity record.
Yeah, no, sure. And speaking of, like, loving people selectively, look at James Comey. I mean, James Comey played a huge role or played a role, at least, in Hillary Clinton's loss when he came out days before the election day and said that he was reopening the email investigation. He was a villain, and then all of a sudden he got fired by Trump and signed a big book deal and branded himself as a resistance stalwart, and he became a hero again.
Well, Joy Reid, I mean, right after Barr came out with this, said it has the makings of a cover-up, which I think would imply that Mueller, who you've exalted as Jesus of Nazareth, is part of it.
Yeah. And that's why we're seeing articles now about how people who put their faith in Mueller are rethinking it, and people got tattoos of Mueller. There was there was romantic fan fiction about Robert Mueller. There was some article somewhere on one of these websites about how someone fantasizing about being romantic with Robert Mueller. I mean, it just speaks to what a fantasy everybody got caught up in. And, when we engage in fantasy, it's because we want to escape from reality, because reality is painful. It was painful for many people that Donald Trump was elected. And the only alternative that was presented to us for 2 years, instead of, say, being an actual organized political society where people are organized around the issues that impact their lives and hear about these issues on the media that they consume, instead, it was all about Robert Mueller. And so, what a shocker then that now people are being disillusioned and are upset when Robert Mueller hasn't returned the outcome that everybody was misled into expecting.
And I also think there needs to be some culpability. I'm not calling for him to resign, but I mean, what the hell, whatever district Adam Schiff represents, what the hell have they been paying for? Because, I mean, he released, his first act was basically to say in front of Congress and his committee and just pass off the Steele dossier as if these were proven facts.
That's right. He read into the record the Steele dossier, which is insane. It's like, imagine it'd be like a Republican reading some kind of birther, say Jerome Corsi did a research document about how Barack Obama was born in Kenya. It'd be like a Republican reading that into the official record. Maybe they did. I don't know. I don't remember. But it's this is Adam Schiff, the head of the Democratic ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, reading this work of fiction, as we all know it is now, into the congressional record. And what Adam Schiff's constituents paid for is basically for him to build a brand, to get on MSNBC and CNN pretty much every single day, and to raise people's hopes that there was going to be a smoking gun, because he said stuff like, I've seen it. I've seen more than circumstantial evidence of collusion, but I can't tell you what it is yet. But trust me, it's worth investigating. Wink, wink.
Well,
and yeah.
Devil's advocate, would you acknowledge that? I mean, there could be things in the final report that are unethical as far as the Trump campaign and whether they had communications with Russia or not, that a candidate shouldn't be doing. I think that's possible. It just might not be any conspiracy. It might not be any espionage or more coordinated espionage thriller.
Well, look, anything is possible, right? I'm not God. It could be in the Mueller report that, like, Trump spoke to Martians, honestly. So anything is possible. But in terms of Schiff saying that he's seen more than circumstantial evidence of collusion, I mean, if there was actual evidence of collusion, presumably Robert Mueller would have alleged it, or at least indicted someone over it. So yeah, it's true. Something damning might be in there. To date, though, I can just say, we can only go by what the available facts are, right? So I can't predict the future, but all of the available facts to date tell us that there was no Trump-Russia connection. There was some people who spoke to some figures on the Trump campaign, either claiming to have connections to Russia when they didn't, like in the case of this professor, Joseph Massoud, who spoke to George Papadopoulos, which sparked the whole initial Trump-Russia investigation. Or there's like the Russian ambassador speaking to Jeff Sessions or to Michael Flynn. But, that's like that kind of conversation between an ambassador and an official, whether you're a senator or you're the incoming national security advisor, those are pretty routine conversations. So, in terms of, evidence of actual collusion, we've seen none yet, and I can't say this for sure, but I'm confident to predict that we will see no evidence of collusion. And so people trying to make this as, well, maybe Mueller found something but not enough to indict or to allege a conspiracy. I don't really buy that. His mandate was not just to find crimes; it was to look into any links and/or coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia. And we haven't seen him present any of it yet, and I get the feeling that he won't in his report. But of course, this is all the more reason why we should see the report.
I want to ask you, pivoting, you were just in Venezuela doing some great reporting, and I think, moving away from the media for a second, we're already seeing the ongoing effects of this reenactment of the Cold War. I mean, I'm seeing between the Wall Street Journal and even quote-unquote liberal outlets, they're framing Venezuela as like, Putin's trying to prop up Maduro, and we need to get in there and finish the job, or else we're going to hand Putin a win. Obviously, not to mention that there's way more countries than Russia that are supporting the Maduro government. We could dissect, things that they've done wrong, but as you know, being on the ground there, this is basically another, same old, us trying to get in there and take the oil and just, we'll make up whatever narrative. But it's interesting to me now that it's again being framed as U.S.-Russia in terms of Venezuela.
Yeah, I mean, it speaks to the imperial mentality that sort of shapes how we look at the world and ourselves, right? I mean, imperial in many ways. First of all, that Venezuela right now is deemed as a U.S.-Russia issue, and really it's a Venezuela issue that the U.S. is brazenly interfering in and trying to overthrow a government and install leaders that it prefers and do away with all the policies that the U.S. government doesn't like. I mean, it's a brazen act of interference carried out with a savage attempt to basically suffocate the country through draconian sanctions, among the harshest sanctions that Washington has ever imposed, seriously worsening Venezuela's economic crisis. And, you compare what the U.S. is doing right now to Venezuela to what this 2-year fixation has been about in the U.S. Allegedly, Russia stole some emails and, put out some juvenile social media ads and bots on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And yet, this is what's being deemed in the U.S. an attack on the country akin to Pearl Harbor and 9/11. So then, if what Russia allegedly did to the U.S. is Pearl Harbor and 9/11, then what do we call what the U.S. is doing right now to Venezuela, trying to overthrow its government and subjecting it to, crippling sanctions, possibly even cutting off its electricity? Venezuela has had a series of blackouts recently, and I mean, I have no proof of it, but surprised if it turns out that this was a work of U.S. involved sabotage. So, I mean, the Venezuela issue just highlights again what a complete joke the obsession over Russia fixation is, how imperial we are, and how we look at countries around the world, especially those who try to chart an independent course. And of course, you know, on top of all that, another irony is the fact that it completely undermines the conspiracy theory, because we're all supposed to believe that Trump is repeatedly doing Vladimir Putin's bidding. Well, here he is right now trying to overthrow Putin's top ally in Venezuela, you know, which Putin, you know, vocally opposes and is now fighting back. So it's like, you know, Venezuela underscores our own hypocrisy and our own delusion, and all the important things that we keep our eye off of in the as we fixate on this dumb conspiracy theory.
And just for the record, since you were there and you spoke with actual people rather than just you know, doing stenography, you know, are the people starving on the streets? Do they need rescue helicopters? And are the people you spoke to, I mean, obviously you didn't speak to hundreds of people, but what is their general feeling about the U.S.'s concern for humanitarian aid in Venezuela?
I did not see a humanitarian crisis. I saw suffering. There's definitely suffering. But of course, Venezuela is not the only place where there is suffering. And so to claim that it's like uniquely a feature of Venezuela is incredibly disingenuous. I mean, right after I went to Venezuela, I went to L.A. where I saw, you know, just as many people as I saw in Venezuela eating from the garbage and sleeping on the street. So there's something really cynical about the way the conditions in Venezuela have been portrayed. There definitely is an economic crisis. There definitely is a lot of frustration with the government, even amongst people who consider themselves government supporters, amongst those I spoke to. My takeaway from all that is that this is like it's a very polarized country, and the best thing everyone else can do is leave it alone and leave it to work out its own problems. The U.S. Has been spending tens of millions of dollars every year on the Venezuelan opposition, on top of now trying to overthrow the government, install the opposition, now that it's tens of millions of dollars, you know, just didn't cut it. That wasn't enough. So, I mean, Venezuela should be left to sort out its own affairs. There are legitimate grounds to criticize the government there. I mean, I heard many of them. But the idea that it's an economic, the idea that it's a humanitarian crisis is just the U.S. trying to follow a familiar playbook, which is where if you can't overthrow the government by economic coercion or by meddling, you try to basically cripple the country enough so that people are so miserable that they kick out the people who you don't like, which was a successful U.S. Approach in a country like Nicaragua, which fought off a terrorist Contra war by the U.S. for 10 years. But finally, after 10 years in 1990, Nicaraguans were faced with a choice by the Bush administration, the first Bush administration, either vote for our guy or our people or continue starving. And they chose not to starve. And so that's what the U.S. is trying to do now in Venezuela. And, you know, for all the talk of a humanitarian crisis, there are also really admirable efforts to deal with the issues under sanctions that prevent people from buying basic supplies. The government has food programs for people. Nobody wants to be relying on government food rations, but you know, at the same time, people don't have an alternative because the country is so limited in terms of what it can do because of the U.S. sanctions. So I think many people there, I heard many people talk about how they don't want to become the next Libya. They don't want U.S. meddling. They don't want U.S. help. They just want to be left alone. You know, when I went to opposition rallies, which is, you know, mostly higher income people, it's a bit different. I heard people there talk about how they would love to have U.S. intervention. But, you know, I also heard people who said they don't want U.S. intervention, but they definitely do want Maduro out. And, you know, it's my takeaway, again, is it's something for the Venezuelans to decide on their own. It's not for anybody else to do for them.
And lastly, what does a Russiagate Slayer do next? Like Disney World? What comes next? Because, I mean, obviously the report still needs to come out, but for the most part, I think your work is your work done? I don't know.
Well, there's a book I want to write on the topic, and I mean, I'm looking forward to definitely moving on and covering other topics more regularly for the last few months. All I've done is Russiagate. Actually, that's not true. I also did Venezuela. So, you know, I'm looking for even more of a variety, but Russiagate in Venezuela has been a pretty good beat for the last little while. I do think it's not over yet. I think a key chapter is over now. But now those who promoted the conspiracy theory are not letting go. We'll see what happens when the report is released, how much they try to extract some, material out of that to fit their conspiracy theory, and how much debunking needs to be done still. I suspect it's probably over pretty soon. But the Russia part of Russiagate is not over, because there's still going to be efforts to paint Russia as this existential threat, to paint the stealing of emails, whether Russia did that or not, and the social media activity as being something dire for us all to stand up to. And all of that has served to benefit some narrow interests that I don't think have the interests of the common good at heart, but have to do with basically justifying the expansion of the national security state, justify military spending because tensions with Russia are profitable for certain sectors, justify the smearing of progressives like Jill Stein, who's been repeatedly smeared as a Russian dupe, and to silence people, to silence critics of all these groups, of democratic elites, and of the bipartisan foreign policy establishment. So there'll be plenty more pushback on Russiagate to do. I just think that we're in a new chapter of it, and now so much of the prevailing buy-in and Kool-Aid drinking was reliant on the fact that Mueller was still investigating. So until Mueller was done, until Mueller had rendered a question, it was everything was presumed to be going in the direction of Mueller finding a conspiracy. Well, now Mueller is done, and he's rejected the conspiracy theory. So a huge wind at the backs of the conspiracy theorists has been removed, and now I think it's in another direction. So people like me who push back from the start, I think, are going to enjoy a bit more freedom now in being able to, get our message out, to actually look at the actual facts. And that's why, Jordan, you're an exception because you had me on way before everybody else. But that's why in the past week with, Mueller issuing his verdict, that's why people who never wanted to talk to me before want to hear from me now. And hopefully
let's be clear. Chris Hayes has not asked you on. Rachel Maddow has not asked you on. CNN has not asked you on. They haven't even asked on Matt Taibbi, where, no disrespect to you, he's at Rolling Stones, so
Sure, yeah.
He's very credible. So it seems
or Glenn Greenwald, who won a Pulitzer Prize. So it's in terms of journalistic credentials, with both Matt and Glenn, they have no they can't. With me they can say, yeah, who is he? Fair enough. But with Matt and Glenn, you have two people with esteemed credentials. Also people like Stephen F. Cohen, someone I really admire and follow very carefully, who writes at The Nation magazine. He's a professor emeritus at Princeton and NYU, expert in Russian studies, but try to find him anywhere on MSNBC or CNN. He was on CNN actually not too long ago once, debating Max Boot, the neocon pundit, and Professor Cohen humiliated Max Boot. So I don't think we'll be seeing Stephen Cohen back on CNN at least anytime soon, or at least to debate anybody, because that was like a demolition.
Well, thanks for taking the time. Until next time, where maybe Maddow will, break the underground Mueller investigation that just hasn't ended.
Yes, that's right.
We can only be so lucky. So thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. Thanks, Jordan.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you. That was my interview with independent journalist Aaron Maté, who was the Russiagate slayer. And you could become a slayer, statuscoup.com/join. That's statuscoup.com/join if you want more good content while also supporting Status Coup. If you didn't notice, while I was airing that, might have dozed off a little bit. Just keeping it real. Haven't been sleeping lately. But I think what Aaron captured really well as what I've been getting at, is Donald Trump, there's a lot more to be concerned about than the evil cabal with the Russian boogeyman. I just interviewed a member of Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, which we'll post that interview tomorrow morning. Trump is just basically blew off a federal judge to give the final permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. A judge had stopped it, and now Trump, in my view, illegally, there will be lawsuits, blew it off, and is giving TransCanada carte blanche to start building that Keystone pipeline. He is trying to take a machete to Obamacare. I'm for Medicare for all. I don't favor Obamacare, but I certainly don't favor getting rid of Obamacare before we have Medicare for all safely in place. He wants to get rid of that. I mean, more tax cuts he wants, deregulation. There's so much to go after Trump on. Now he's talking about closing down the border because of the fake emergency at the border. I mean, I have chosen with this channel and this network not to do 24/7 Trump and not to have 24/7 Trump derangement, because of course I think he is an awful person, awful president, but everybody's covering Donald Trump. I wouldn't be giving you anything you can't find anywhere else. So when I do cover him and what he's doing, I try to make it different and unique so that I'm not being redundant. Hey, if I really wanted to cash in on Trump, if all I cared about and all we cared about was clicks, subscribers, and money, all we would do is Trump 24/7, because that's what gets the clicks. That's why certain outlets do 24/7 Trump, because it brings you clicks, it brings you money, it brings you, people like the circus. But we're not going to do that. And I think that is the real danger that Russiagate has brought. This new Cold War hysteria, this new McCarthyism, but more importantly, what hasn't been covered, what's been ignored. The vulnerable communities like Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, Standing Rock, Flint, that get no coverage for their injustice and the corruption that's ravaging their communities. And doesn't need to just be minority communities. I mean, plenty of white communities that have awful things being done to them by their own government that the mainstream media doesn't cover because they've been pushing this ridiculous conspiracy. So I thank Aaron. We'll keep in touch with him as news develops. Thank you for watching. I will have more. I don't have anything to report now, but I am seeing some tweets with some, not people officially accusing Joe Biden of anything, but just people recounting things they've heard. I don't really want to be in the business of just posting things from people who heard something. That's not journalistically sound. But we'll see if there's any more actual people coming forward accusing him of inappropriate touching, kissing, smelling, whatever else he's been doing for the last 40, 50 years. So I really hope, in anticipation for the documentary, you'll consider signing up. Again, statuscoup.com/join. Even if you're not going to sign up officially, go check out the page. Share the page with other friends that are into politics that might be progressive. Even if they're not progressive, just spread the word. Also, spread the word about the YouTube channel. Spread the word about our GoFundMe, which is super important. We are at $51,385, which might have gone up because this is recorded. So we want to get to 52,000 as soon as possible, and we'll be launching a separate mini little thing to raise money in anticipation of the release of our Flint documentary, because we definitely need a couple dollars more for marketing, advertising, and all those things to maximize exposure for this critical documentary. I'll be back tomorrow. Remember, most people are not lacking compassion. Most people have no earthly idea what is going on. Peace out.